It's quiet without our iPod, which temporarily broke down. Thank you all for being here. My name is Penny Wright, and we're really happy to have you here and to have a return visit from Steve Woloschin, who's going to talk about smartphones. Not iPhones, by the way, per se, but smartphones. And before we get started, I want to tell you that for those of you who might want a sort of a recap or refresher after this program, sign your name, telephone number, and email onto a pad where you walked in. On the table, there'll be a pad. And Steve will forward his talk to me, to Joanna actually, and we'll forward it to you. We want your telephone number in case we can't read the email address. All right, so a few words about Steve. He's been a go-to guy for anything technical for many years. He started in the 1970s working for IBM as a customer engineer, responsible for keeping his customers' card punch machines and computer systems in their offices in the New York area. While he was solving technical issues during the day, he went on to earn his BA in Business Administration at night, and eventually graduated from Marist College following his move upstate to work at IBM's Software Development Laboratory in Kingston, New York. He continued working in Kingston until the early 1990s when he decided to relocate to Long Island to work for Symbol Technologies, where he held a variety of marketing, technical development, and management positions. There, his efforts resulted in his name on 2 patents. He eventually left Symbol to pursue other opportunities, including technology sales and service, as well as teaching at a local college. And during that time, he also earned an MS in Technical Systems Management from Stony Brook, along with a teaching certificate in educational computing. He then decided to join Motorola Solutions, where he was brought in to establish and lead a new system integration test department. After 5 years, he decided to focus full-time on technical education contract work, such as teaching telecommunications field workers how to use tablet computers to replace archaic and obsolete paper-based input machines. While he is now officially retired, he prefers keeping active, and that's what he's doing these days, sharing his significant knowledge about technology with various people on Long Island. Please welcome Steve Woloschin.
Thank you, Penny, for such a nice introduction. As Penny said, I'm close to retired, but I try and keep busy and sharing my knowledge. I just always get a kick out of, sharing my knowledge. And if somebody walks away and says, I learned something that will be useful today, I feel good about that. So many people who try to hold on to everything to make themselves more powerful that I never really understood that. So anyway, I know we have a hard stop at 6:30, so I'll keep moving. And I also want to say it's the first time I'm presenting this particular presentation. So if anyone has any suggestions, if you want to email me later, my email address is there, or any kind of feedback, I'd appreciate it, because it could always be improved. But my intent tonight is to talk about smartphones in general, not anything specific, but just to give you a background and some information, and I'm trying not to make it technical, but there are some charts that look a little technical, but I promise we're going to keep it at a very high level. But I feel it's necessary because once you understand what I hope to show you, I think other things will make more sense when you're using your smartphone. And but we'll just get into it and we'll see. Hopefully this will work. So my agenda is to have a generic smartphone discussion, not really iPhone specific or Android phone specific, and covering hardware, meaning the parts of the smartphone, and the software, meaning the operating system and the apps of what you download. There were other smartphones other than iPhones and Android phones, but they're pretty much gone. They tried, it's different. Microsoft tried, they're done, and they just couldn't compete. So today, I'd say 99.9% of everybody has either a smartphone running Android or Apple's, what they call iOS. Did I move? Okay. So first we'll talk about the hardware, and please don't be intimidated by all of these terms. We're really going to make it as simple as possible. We'll talk about the processor, which is really the engine. Thinking of a car, it's like the engine. It makes it run. And the memory, which is what the engine talks to. Well, I'll get into it more. I'll just say we're going to talk about that. And storage, where you keep everything before you or after you use it. Screen sizes, the different radios. Who knows that your smartphone has 4 different radios? There's cellular, there's Wi-Fi, there's near-field communications, there's Bluetooth. We're going to cover that, so we walk away from here today. You're going to say, well, I understand why there's 4 different radios. And what's airplane mode? Who knows what airplane mode is? Some people don't, so we're going to talk about that, why it's not really the right name anymore. And we'll get into that. We'll talk about the batteries, how it affects your, how the battery life can be affected and improved by certain techniques. And the SIM card, that's the thing that you put in the phone that has your phone number and some other information. Now, I hope this isn't too technical. Actually, I could talk about this for 2 hours easily, and there's a whole lot more that I've stripped out of here. But I just wanted to show everybody, your smartphone is really a personal computer, a PC. And it has the engine, and here they call it the CPU, the central processing unit. It's also, we call it the processor. Hopefully you've heard the term processor. And the physical storage, that's really, it could be an SD card. Some of you know that some phones you can plug them in, a lot of phones you can't. But it's really where everything is stored. When your phone is turned off and you first turn it on, how does it know what to do? Well, there's a lot of information in the physical storage. Like the operating system is stored there, the apps are stored there, everything's there. And the phone starts up and the CPU says, give me the information from the operating system so I can load up and get going. And that's when it warms up, and then you get your screen that you can start to use the phone. So I'll walk away from this for a second. But there's a lot of interaction here where it's getting the information from the storage. And then once it has that, it has to work with it somewhere. So it puts it into the memory and it works with it there. If you're writing an email and sending it, you're working in the memory area. That's all that I want to show about that, just so you know that these different parts exist. Like I said, I can talk about this easily for 2 hours, but I don't want to get too technical. So, talking about the processor, what matters, it's having enough power to meet your needs. Generally, if you bought pretty much any smartphone today, there would be certainly enough power to start the phone and to run the applications. And at the high end, you might have the fastest, you might want a processor that's so fast that as soon as you hit anything on the screen, it immediately reacts very quickly. Some of you may have seen phones or used phones where you touch something on the screen and you wait. And then a few seconds later it does something. That's called lag. Nobody likes to lag. But a weaker processor, or if you don't have enough storage, or if you don't have enough memory, you can start to experience that. A mid-range phone, which is probably what most people buy, it still works fine. It might not be quite as snappy, as they say, as the high-end phone. And the low-end phone, someone who just wants a basic phone, they just want to make phone calls, maybe they'll do a couple things with the internet because it's a smartphone and they can look something up with a browser. But they're certainly not playing any games or doing anything intensive. And maybe they can get away with a low end or what we call a budget phone. And so what doesn't matter here is the brand, because you really can't pick and choose the brand. You pick a phone and it has a processor and they pretty much all work the same. So there's Apple, who makes their own processors for all their own phones, and there's everybody else. Qualcomm, MediaTek, whatever, those you'll find in the Android phones. But it really doesn't matter because they all work the same for all intents and purposes. If there's any questions, please raise your hand and we'll stop and talk about it. The random access memory, if you recall, I'm going to go back. That's on the right side where it says memory. What matters is you have enough of the memory to run smoothly. And what I mean is, you can buy phones that have barely the minimum memory, the cheapest. Well, with Apple, you don't get too much choice about this. They give you what they think you need. With the Android phones, there's more of a spread. But I've seen the least expensive phones having these numbers. That's 512 megabytes to 1 gigabyte. I know these numbers probably don't mean a whole lot, so it's hard to give you a feeling for it. And there's 1,000 megabytes in a gigabyte, so 512 is a half a gigabyte to 1 gigabyte, just to give you an idea. To start up the phone, it says the minimum you need is about 1 gigabyte, just to start the phone and not do much more. And if you have 2 gigabytes of memory, which most phones will have at least that, you can start the phone and you can run some apps. Now, you can keep loading apps, until the phone will finally crash or, start running very slowly. And you asked me before about getting rid of some apps. One trick, I'd say, is to only have the apps running that you're using. If you start up an app and you're using it like your email, and then you're not going to use it for a while, you can turn it off and get rid of it, and that'll free up memory. Okay, let me go back to this one more time. When the processor loads some application, it starts to fill this up, and eventually it'll become full, just like a bucket that's full of water. So when you quit the app, you put the space back so it's available for other apps you might want to start running. Some people have 20 apps open. Nobody's using 20 apps. They just don't even realize it, and the phone starts to go slowly, to run slower, and then they're not sure why. So it's good housekeeping to do that. So if you know how to quit the apps or stop them, that's great. If you don't know how, that's one thing that you probably want to find out about, and it might help you to have your phone running better. So let me get back to the other part. So here's some recommendations. Well, what I say is the minimum to run, is 2 gigabytes to 4 gigabytes, but it depends on the type of application you're running and the size of the application. What I mean about that, there's some very simple applications that take very little space. So you load it and there's hardly any difference, and it's not very demanding. I know I'm going to guess nobody here is really a gamers. Mostly it's the young people. You see them with the phone and they're playing those shooting games or the driving games. Those applications are huge, and they're very, what we call processor intensive. They're using the processor a lot. They're using the screen a lot, and those are very demanding applications. So when I say this type and size of application running, if you're doing something simple like browsing the web or just writing an email, that's not very demanding. So you won't see your phone slow down if you have that open versus the game. And how many applications are running at the same time? We call that concurrently. That's going to slow down the phone eventually. You're not going to notice it with 3 or 4 applications, but if you've got 20 or so, you probably would see that your phone starts to slow down. And just as important, your battery will die sooner with a lot of applications running at the same time, because the processor is trying to make this one run, make this one run, make this one run, and it keeps doing that, and that uses a lot more battery power than if the processor is what we call idle. It's just sitting there most of the time waiting for something to do. Okay, when the processor runs, it uses the battery just like a car engine uses gas, and if the engine's revving a lot, it's going to use more gas. Yes?
At night, when you go to sleep, are you leaving the phone on and nothing's happening if you leave out your apps? So it's not a drain on the battery, or should you shut the phone off at night? Or?
Well, that's a personal preference. The question is, what's the advice about at night? A lot of people will charge their phone at night, and if it's plugged into the charger, we'll talk more about that, but if it's plugged in, then you're not so concerned about the battery use because the phone's charging. I usually shut off the apps I don't need, but I have one app that turns my phone into like a big clock, and I set it on my night table, so if I wake up, I can see what time it is. That's an app, actually, but it's a very low-intensive app. It takes hardly anything for the phone to put the correct time on the screen. You know, so that'll just run, and it won't take very much. So like I said, if you're charging the phone, it really doesn't matter. If you're in a position where you don't have the charger and you're trying to minimize the battery use overnight or for any period of time, then you'd want to shut off whatever apps that you don't need. Other things that you might do to conserve battery power, the screen is one of the biggest battery hogs, as we call it. The screen will use up a lot of battery, and it depends on how bright the screen is. If it's turned up to full brightness, you'll use significantly more battery power. So you should think about, well, in this room, if it was turned down quite a bit, you could still see it. If you're out in the bright sunlight, you might not be able to see it unless you turn up the brightness. So that's another thing that you might consider. Yes, ma'am?
When you say shut off the app, is that the same as disabling it?
No. If you disable an app, then you can't start it. Okay? Let's talk about that. So, if you have an iPhone, you go to the App Store, the Apple App Store. If you have an Android phone, you go to Google Play. And it's basically the same operation. You see an app that you want, you download it. Most of them are free, some of them you have to pay for. But the app is loaded over the air, and it goes into your phone, and it starts, right? Now, when you load an app like that, when you download an app, it's automatically enabled, and you can run it. When we say disable an app, you can go into your settings, and if you disable it, it won't run anymore until you re-enable it. You're not deleting it, it's still there in your storage, as I showed you in that diagram, but it won't start unless you re-enable it. It won't start automatically or anything, so you'd have to go and enable it. If the app is running, and you, like in both Apple and Android, you can bring up the apps and flick them away. And that pretty much shuts them down, you know, for now. So if you wanted to use it again, you'd have to restart the app. Does that make sense?
So how do you close?
I'm sorry?
The difference from disabling or closing, you say you should close the apps.
Yes. You're closing the app, and then if you want to run the app again, you just tap on it and it starts, because it's still enabled. It's able to run.
So,
If you disable it, you just can't run.
so, okay, I actually asked somebody this same question, but a lot of us have iPhones. Those who have iPhones have the little icons here on our iPhone. We don't, just because we have an icon here, it doesn't mean it's running. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So you don't have to get rid of this. You just have to make sure that when you finish using it, you click it up.
Correct. Every app that you have installed will display an icon on your home screen, or one of several home screens if you've got several if you've got a lot of apps, you might have to, flick through the home screen to see all the different apps that you have installed. But they're not running unless you start the app, or it automatically starts when you turn your phone on. Some apps might be set up to do that. Okay? And my recommendation, I say, if you have a low-end phone, even though you could start the operating system with less than 2 gigabytes, I would never own a phone with less than 2 because you're going to have lag. It's going to run slowly. And it's not that expensive anymore to have a decent amount of memory. If you have a mid-range phone, you can see some are available with 3 gigabytes or even 4 gigabytes of RAM. And now you're getting into high-end phones when you're above 4 gigabytes. What it means is the operating system can run, and you can start quite a few applications, and they can all run concurrently because there's room in the memory. 4 gigabytes of memory or whatever. That's enough room to run, a significant number of apps. So just to give you a number, so next time you buy a phone or you talk to somebody, if you know that information, or you talk to a salesperson, you can ask them to provide that information. They give you some idea of, the capability of the phone. Storage is different from memory because storage is where everything is stored, but it's not being used. It's like the garage, if you will. The operating system's there, all of your apps are there in storage, but you're not running them there. They're just parked there, if you will. And when the phone starts, it automatically gets the operating system from storage and it runs it. If you start up any apps, it gets it from the storage. So when you download an app, what happens is it really comes into your phone and gets put in its own position in storage. Right? And then when you go to run it, the processor calls it out of the storage and it runs it in the processor. I hope this makes sense. All right? I'd really like some feedback maybe after, if I'm making sense or this, just isn't working. It's like I said, it's the first time I'm giving this presentation. So how much storage would you need on a phone, or, what would you want to buy? At the low end, I've seen phones with 8 gigabytes of storage. That's barely enough. The operating system probably takes 4 or 5 gigabytes. It leaves you very little room to load more apps, to download more apps. At the high end, what they call flagship phones, like the expensive Samsung and other companies, those phones that are $700, $800, $900, they'll have as much as 256 gigabytes. So you could download stuff all day. You could have your whole record collection from 50 years ago. If you have it digitized, you could have every album you ever owned on there, and you can listen to all your music with that much storage. Do you really need that much? Probably not. Probably no one in this room. I don't need that much. But you got some people who feel that they have to have a lot of storage because they want to put a lot of stuff on their phone.
Where would you find on your phone how many gigabytes you have?
That information is available in the settings area. If you looked at about your phone, once again, the Apple is a little different than the Android, but it should be in there, and it should tell you, that information. And if you're using, like for the memory also, it would tell you how much memory you have and how much is used. With storage, it would tell you how much is available.
I don't understand the difference between memory and storage.
Okay. Let me go back to that picture.
Same thing, different numbers.
Okay. When you download an application, you're not running it, you just download it from the store. It all goes here. When the phone is off, well, the operating system is here. Everything you have on your phone is here. But the processor just gets that information from here, but it doesn't do anything with it here. The processor needs the memory to, it loads, let's say you're running an app. It doesn't matter what it is, email. You want to run email. It gets email out of here, and it puts the email here so that you can write an email, you can read an email, you can look at your different emails, whatever. It's all happening here. Then, when you kill the program, when you close the program, it just disappears from here. It's still there to start again. Right?
So that's why the storage number is higher than the memory?
Yes, yes. Perfect question. Yes, sir.
Difference between RAM and ROM. The two, one is utilizing, the other one is, it's the same principle as computers, but in a smaller
I
version.
know, I'm just trying to keep it at a very high level. Okay? And it's not to, it's just because, you know, someone who's not a computer person, this is new to them,
Right,
okay?
right.
And it's not an obvious thing to everybody. So, but it's something that I think it's really important to know. Most people just don't know this, and they're buying phones and they're using them. Unfortunately, they don't have a clue about how it's working. So I'm just trying to show how everything is here. You know, you got 50 applications. They're all loaded in here. They're stored in. This is like a garage, right? And this is like the engine of the car. I'm not sure what, but it needs something to work with, like when it's working. And it can only, also the speed of data going in and out of here is about 1,000 times slower than the data going in and out of here. You need something that's very, very quick. But, you know, anyway, I'm getting too technical. You know, and I apologize for that. All I wanted to get across was everything that you have on your phone is stored here.
So when you buy a phone and they ask you, how many gigabytes do you want?
Well,
Yeah.
I think the thing to do is to look at the different phones when you go to, let's say you go to Best Buy. And if you want to buy an Apple phone, you can buy it there. The Apple phones are available with different levels of memory
Right,
and storage.
they ask you.
So, yeah, so the numbers I gave you are the ones, you know, is my idea of what I think you should ask for, and, you know, at a minimum.
Okay.
And you might be happy with something that's towards the bottom, and it might be adequate. But what Apple has done is they've increased the high end as well as the low end. What they used to offer, like 16 gigabytes here, they don't offer that anymore. I think the lowest they offer might be 32 or maybe 64. Because they realize people have, the applications are larger, people want to store more applications, just don't want to fit. And their operating system is getting larger. So the operating system would take up more and more of this space, and then you need space for the stuff you want. Right? So when you do go shopping, I'm just trying to make sense of some of the numbers, you know, to give you the minimum I think that you need. Do they answer your question?
I think so. I didn't realize there was a difference between them and.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, most people, they mix up, they hear memory, and they talk about this,
Yes.
you know, like a memory card or something. But it's, memory is the random access memory that you're using here, and this is storage, and that's the way I refer to it, and that's, you know, helps me to make the distinction, right? But unfortunately, a lot of people refer to the whole thing as memory, and then you don't have a clue what's going on. All right, let me get back to where I was. So that's discussion on memory. Now storage, we're talking about storage too. And storage is you know, that's for holding everything that you put into your phone. Also, when you buy the phone, it has the operating system installed. So part of the storage is already being used by that. But hopefully you'll have enough extra storage to hold all of the apps that you want to have on your phone. And once again, for some people, that's just a few and that's all they want. Other people seem to load every app they hear about. Like, this is cool, this is good, especially when they're free. They just download stuff like crazy. But then, after a while, you probably would find you've got 100 apps installed, you're really only using 10 or 20. So at a certain point, you might say, well, I haven't used this one in months, I'm going to delete it. And you should go through, they call that housekeeping, You should go through your phone once in a while, and you find apps you're not using, delete them. And your phone's just gonna run better, for that.
How do you delete?
Well, it's different from Apple and Android, but that's one of the things that, I could talk to you later about that, but it's not one of the things that I was really planning to discuss today, specifics on how do I do something on my phone. But if we have time, we can look at that if that's okay. Right? Also with storage, a lot of phones, as opposed to a computer like this, even though it works the same, a computer like this has what you call removable storage. You can plug it in and take it out. On a lot of phones, including all Apple phones, there's no removable storage. It's all built into the phone, which makes it really important that you buy the phone you need with the right amount of storage, because you can't change it later. Other phones, some of the Android phones, they have the ability to plug in a little card to increase the amount of storage. They call that like a micro SD card. And you could have huge amounts of storage on these tiny cards that are smaller than my pinky nail. It's very incredible of what they can do. But, for the most part, the storage is on the phone when you buy it, and you can't really do too much about it. So it's important to know, to have an idea, at least, of, what you think you're going to need. And that's maybe a discussion you should have with the salesperson when you go to buy your next phone. Talk about these things. Who knows the difference between Wi-Fi data, Wi-Fi connection and cellular? This is really important. It's something that I want to hopefully explain. What I'm showing here is you have a phone in your house and you have a wireless access point. Everybody okay with that? Right? Most people have that. And you have what you call Wi-Fi, where you connect to the wireless access point. And you could use data all day long. You could be surfing the internet or email or streaming music or video. It's not charged any extra. It's just a flat rate you're paying. You can also do the same things connected to a cellular tower a few miles away from your house. But depending on who's your cellular provider and what your plan is, you might be paying money for every bit that comes across the line. So all of a sudden, your phone bill is, more this month than it was last month because you've been doing a lot of this. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows. In the beginning, when we had just cell phones, I'll go back here, 25 years ago, when we just had cell phones, flip phones, we were just talking on the phone. And we were just connected to the cellular tower, and we were doing voice to the cellular tower. And there was no data, it was just voice. We could have a phone conversation. And then the Wi-Fi came along, and you were able to connect to your Wi-Fi router in your house for data. So when you're surfing the internet, or you're doing email, or any application that requires a connection to the internet, it's going on Wi-Fi, and you're not worried about how much data you're consuming. Today, they figured out how to get data across cellular, and they figured out how to use voice over Wi-Fi. Once again, I hope I'm not getting too technical. But my point is, you can have a voice conversation here without even having this, or you could be doing data, email and stuff over here. So you need to know what's going on. If you have a cellular plan with unlimited data, then you don't care so much. But if you're paying for the data, you should care about it. And another thing I want to talk about is Optimum. If you're an Optimum customer, they have over 2 million access points spread around the New York area. So if you're out and about, you can still be doing Wi-Fi, because they've got these things all over the place. Right? So if you have a cellular you have a data plan that charges you for data, and you're connecting a Wi-Fi, you're avoiding this. So that may or may not be important to you. But if you have a cellular plan where it's unlimited and you're not paying for the data because it's a flat rate unlimited, then you don't care if you're connected to this or this. You know, that they're both going to work. First,
If you have both your Wi-Fi and your data on your phone in your house, you have cable with the Wi-Fi, does the phone automatically choose one over the other?
excellent question. Yes, it does, and I'm glad you asked. I would have forgotten to say that. The phone is set to use Wi-Fi first if it's available. And if it's not available, then it might use this. Do you have a question?
That was
Same question? Okay. Yes?
I have another question. What you just said about optimum around this area. You need to have an individual Wi-Fi to connect with a password or a security code in order to connect your phone to Wi-Fi. Because if you just go and open Wi-Fi, then your data.
It's a question that you first have to make a connection to Optimum. You have to register your phone. If you're an Optimum customer,
Yeah.
Is that how you get to the hotspot?
sorry?
Is that how you get to the hotspot?
Yes. Yes, if you're an Optimum customer, you know, in addition to using your own Wi-Fi at home or at your friend's house or in the library, you can log on to Optimum's website and you can go through the registration process to make your phone automatically able to connect to an Optimum Wi-Fi when it sees one.
And these are secured?
Well, they're supposed to be. I can't speak to that because I don't know for sure. But since you asked the question, is it secure? I think if I was doing banking, if I needed to do something secure like banking, I'd feel more comfortable connected here and connected to Optimum. That's just my own preference. This could still be compromised. You never know. I mean, the best way is when you're home on your own Wi-Fi, assuming you're set up properly and you have the right, everything's right. Okay? Any other questions? So, does everyone know now the difference between cellular and Wi-Fi?
No.
Okay? I asked people what he talked to, like, nobody knows this, and I think everybody should know this. You know, I think
We're
it's-
sitting here, we're not connected to the internet, though, are we?
I don't know.
It's like the library,
No.
you have to have a code go in.
Well, depends if, yeah, I have a cellular signal.
Okay,
Okay?
okay, continue to the internet.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there's two other radios besides the cellular and the Wi-Fi. I forgot to mention, each of these are a separate radio in your phone, right? And the phone can use each of them individually. But there's also Bluetooth. I know everyone's heard of Bluetooth, right? When you think of Bluetooth, you should think of replacing a short wire that you might have had between a computer and a printer. In the olden days, if I had a desktop computer and I wanted to connect to a printer and print something, you had to put a cable in. It's the only way. But today, we could have a computer like this and a printer over there, and they can connect in Bluetooth, and that means short-range radio signal, point to point, from here to there only. And it replaces the wire, and it's just easier. You don't have to mess with the wires and have the right plug. So Bluetooth has evolved over the years. You can connect to hundreds, if not thousands, of different devices. I just put 3 for an example. If you're in the car and you're using a headset, Bluetooth headset, right? That's a short-range Bluetooth connection. You can also use headsets if you have a headphone jack, and it's wired. And that's probably a great example to show, oh, Bluetooth is so much easier. You don't have the wire getting in the way. The printer, like I just spoke about, a speaker, all of these things will connect with Bluetooth. You have to set it up the first time. you have to do what's called pairing. Has anyone heard of pairing? The first time you want to connect the device, whether it's a speaker, a headset, whatever, you have to go through a procedure with your phone and the device, and you have to pair them, and they recognize each other. And then every time after that, when the phone sees that particular device that's already paired, it'll automatically connect. Right? My smartwatch connects with Bluetooth to my phone. Yes?
Can you go back and talk about airplane mode?
Yeah.
Sure. All right, I was getting to that. I was going to get to that 1 minute.
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to talk about cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the last one is called NFC, which many of you probably haven't heard about, but it's something that's coming very quickly. Has everyone heard about smart payments, electronic payment? You know, of course, in the old days we swipe a card. Now today we have the chip, which is supposed to be more secure, and it is. And what we're coming to and starting to use is NFC, which stands for Near Field Communication. That means a very, very short distance radio signal, like in inches. And you can take your phone and you, in this case, they just wave it past the payment device, and it exchanges data over the air over this very short radio connection. And from what I've read, this is more secure than even using the chip. So when it comes along, I don't think you should be concerned about security and using it if you want to try and use it. But this is used strictly for electronic payment, and as I said, it's a very, very short range. So anyway, that's your 4 radios: cellular, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and NFC.
Steve, would that be Apple Pay?
Apple Pay uses this. That's one example.
That's what this is.
Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, Google Pay, they're all using near-field communications. There's probably a dozen different companies that are trying to get you signed up to use their system. Yes?
And how secure is the system?
This is, from what I've read, and I've read a lot of articles about it, this is the most secure payment system. Much more secure than swiping a card, the old magnetic stripe, and more secure than using the chip, which I'm told is also very secure, but this is supposed to be even more secure.
So you don't have to pay extra just to sign up for like Apple Pay? Do you?
I'm sorry?
Do you have to pay to use this service?
I don't think so.
And the other question is, you sync it with what, a bank account or several accounts? I mean, maybe you want to...
The way it works, I don't have a lot of experience, but I've read about it. If you sign up for this, you will put your credit card information into your smartphone. Let's say you have 2 or 3 cards that you use when you go out shopping. You have a MasterCard and a Visa and a Discover. You can enter the information into the NFC app on your phone, and then one of those cards would be the default, meaning the one you would first try and use automatically. And when you go to pay, you're buying your stuff, and then you take your phone and you swipe it, not swipe it, but just position it near the terminal, the device, and it exchanges information over the radio, and you're done.
Now, I'll just have to get my credit card.
Yes,
As long as they're,
Yes.
store has this.
yes. Well, with the chip, like I've gone into stores and I had to insert the card in the chip reader. Now, they're just taking the card and, yeah, that's the way that works is, you know, the device is sending out a signal, and your card actually is sending an electronic echo back. And it's a similar type of thing, but not exactly the same. But it's just as easy to use because you just take your card. Yeah. You know, when you go to Costco, if anyone goes to Costco, they always take your card and then they stick it in the machine. And they've been doing, you know, putting it in the chip reader for the last year or 2. And the last few times I went, they just waved it over the machine. Yeah. Okay. So we want to talk about airplane mode.
Yeah.
Okay. So what airplane mode does is it shuts down all 4 radios. Because when you go in an airplane, up until recently, they didn't want you to have any radio on. They were afraid it was going to screw up or interfere with their communications. And that's a whole separate debate whether that's valid or not. Now today, probably for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, maybe longer, on some planes, you can use Wi-Fi, right? You either pay for it or it might even be free by now. Well, anyway, but you're not allowed to have your cellular on. I mean, airplane mode is everything's on, all 4 radios are on or off, right? So what you can do is you can turn on airplane mode, all your radios are off, and then individually you can go and turn on Wi-Fi. Now Wi-Fi is the only radio on, and you're making the airline happy because you only have the one radio on. I wonder how many people understand that or don't understand it, and they just turn on, they turn off airplane mode and all 4 radios are going. You know, so I haven't heard of a plane crashing because of that. I hope I never do. But it makes me wonder about how valid it is, you know, as far as the radios interfering. Hopefully they're not. Does that make sense what I said?
Sorry, I did not.
It's fine.
Are you saying that we turn on airplane mode and then?
It's
also
confusing. When you turn airplane mode on, that shuts off the radios.
Okay.
All right? So the only way to do it properly, as far as I know, if you're using Wi-Fi on the plane with your phone, then you should turn airplane mode on, shut off all the radios, and then individually turn on Wi-Fi. And in the settings, you can do that. So now Wi-Fi is the only one out of 4 radios that's on. Okay? Here's the other thing about airplane mode. It has nothing to do with airplanes. If you're in a situation where you're trying to conserve battery power, because you're running out of battery power, you're not going to be able to recharge your phone for a while, and you don't need to talk to anybody or communicate with anybody, but you want your phone on, you can turn airplane mode on, which turns off all the radios, and your battery will not be working so hard because it won't have to power those things. And then if you want to check for messages, you could turn airplane mode off for a few minutes, see if you got any new messages, and then turn it back on to shut off the radios.
That's the idea when you're abroad as well, isn't it, to do it that way?
Yeah, well, if there's nothing to connect to, then you don't need to have the antennas, the radios on.
But you want to at least pick up a telephone call.
Well, then you would just have cellular on. Now, you would not have airplane mode on, but you would shut off individually the Wi-Fi. Okay? If airplane mode is off and the 4 radios are turned on, let's not worry about NFC because that uses so little power it doesn't matter. Bluetooth, if you've got a device that needs to communicate with your phone, like your smart watch or something, you keep Bluetooth on. That can individually be turned on and off. And that will be up to your needs if you had kept it on or off. But if you're out and about and there's no Wi-Fi for you to connect to, you should shut off Wi-Fi, which can be turned off individually, because what your phone is doing when there's no Wi-Fi to connect to, your phone is looking around to connect to Wi-Fi. If Wi-Fi is on, your phone is saying, can I connect? Is there something to connect to? It keeps looking. That uses battery power. If you have no intention of connecting to Wi-Fi, you should know how to go into your settings and turn off Wi-Fi, right? Especially if you're away from home where there's nothing to connect to, right? But if you do go into a hotel or someplace where you trust the connection, then you would turn Wi-Fi on, connect to that source, and then when you're done and you're leaving, turn Wi-Fi off again, right? Does that make sense? Okay? All right. We'll switch gears now, talk about the screen. Oh, yes.
Just a quick question. On my iPhone, when I put the airplane mode on, the Wi-Fi is off, Bluetooth is off, has something called cellular airplane mode.
I have no idea what that is. Cellular, I have no idea what that is. I'm gonna have to look that up. Now, I know I have to be out here in 10 minutes, so I need to.
I'm not saying you have to be out of here, I'm saying that the information part
Okay.
should be over because we have a 1-hour program.
Okay, all right, so let me get through just another couple of slides. I want to talk about the screen, and screen size matters. Couple more technical things, and I think it's important to understand. There's something called pixels. Pixel is a dot in the screen, and depending on the size of the screen and how clear the image is, it requires a certain amount of dots. And I'm talking thousands or millions of dots on the screen. Anyway, it takes battery power and processor power to light up each dot. So, if you have the cheap, once again today, the phones are much, much better than they were years ago. In the olden days, they had screens that had barely enough dots, and your pictures were not very sharp, and you didn't really have a good picture compared to what you have today. If you look at televisions from years ago, they didn't have many dots on the screen, and the pictures were not as good. You know, today they have 4K, you've heard of, 4K televisions. That means 4,000 lines from the top to the bottom. You know, and it's much more than it used to be. It used to be in the hundreds of lines, and that's why the pictures are so good. But anyway, I'm just trying to get the point across that it's just that if you're gonna, if you think you want a really sharp picture, you're taking a lot of using the camera, and it's really important. You're going to get a higher end phone with a better screen, and what they call the amount of dots on the screen resolution. The higher the resolution, the more dots on the screen. I don't want to get too much more into it, but it's important to know about this. And if you're buying a phone, you should ask the salesperson about the screen resolution and ask them to explain if they're the same or if they're different, you know, why one is better than the other. All right? And there's another thing, I'm not going to spend much time on the technology of the screen. I'm just put it there to show that there's different kinds of technologies, and some of them are easier to see in bright sunlight, some of them are a little more battery efficient because you don't have to have a backlight. But I don't, you know, we're running out of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on that. All right, and this shows, like the old phones, the screen might have been this big, and it had so many dots across this way. It says like 480 by 320. And this large phone, it has 1,080 dots this way, and almost 2,000 that way. That's a lot more dots that the computer, the processor has to light up. The processor has to address every little dot and what color it's going to be, and it makes it work a lot harder. And these are all these different phones, you know, a sample of phones that are available. But you don't have to memorize anything here. It's just to show that there's all these different choices that you have, you know, as one of the choices when you're buying a phone. And the battery, I think this is the last thing. What matters is the capacity. You know, the larger the battery, the longer your phone's going to run. But the battery capacity is measured in something called milliampere hours, and it's kind of like fuel in your tank. The more fuel you put in the tank, the longer it's going to go. But just like when you fill the tank, it makes your car heavier, and you've got to carry around that extra weight. If you have a larger battery with more milliamps, your phone is going to be heavier, and you know, it's going to be heavier, and the battery is going to be bigger. You know, so that's a trade-off. If you want the smallest phone possible, for whatever reason, it's probably going to have a smaller battery, and that would just be a trade-off. Also, the quality of the battery. Some of the companies, like the high-end companies that everyone has heard of, they'll probably, most likely, have batteries that are higher quality than than phones that you may never heard of the names that are available, you know, from the cheapest phones, if you will. There's a lot of quality differences from the cheapest batteries to the best ones. The best ones will just last longer between charges. You'll be able to recharge them more times before they start to fail. The cheaper ones will just start to fail sooner. There's also something called quick charge, which some of you might have heard of. And that's the ability to get up to maybe 75 or 80% of your battery's capacity in 1 hour or so. A lot of new phones will have quick charge capability. And the other thing I wanted to mention is wireless charging, which phones are starting to offer. And what that means is, you might have a stand and you just place your phone on the stand without plugging anything in and it'll charge. Very convenient, but it doesn't charge as quickly as if it's plugged in. So you should know that. If you're charging overnight, your phone's just going to sit there. Well, it doesn't matter because over a period of 6 or 8 hours, it's going to have plenty of time to fully charge. But if you need to charge quickly and you have a quick charger and your phone's quick charge capable, you might want to use that special quick charger and get it as much power as possible because you only have half an hour or an hour to get it charged up and you have to leave it again. So I just want to make sure you're aware that these things exist, and it might or might not be important depending on what you're doing. All right, the last thing I think is a SIM card, and you know, that's the thing you get from your carrier, whether it's Verizon or AT&T or Sprint or T-Mobile. They will give you the card, or they will put it in the phone when you buy the phone, and that card has your identity on it, your phone number and other information, and it's required for you to use your phone. And if you go to, you know, change phones, you'll have to move the SIM card to the new phone. Also, if you change carriers, it used to be that you had to get a new phone number, but today they have what's called number portability. You can keep your number and go from one carrier to another. You just have to work with the carriers and tell the new one, you know, here's my number, I want to use this number on with your phone, and they'll work it out, and it takes an hour or so to switch over. I've done that, and it's really not an issue anymore. It used to be a much bigger deal. And most phones only support one card. You can put one SIM card in. Some phones, you can actually put 2 SIM cards in. And they don't even have to be with the same carrier. So if you have a work number and a personal phone, you don't have to carry 2 phones. You have them both in that one phone, and someone calls your personal number, rings, and you know who it is, and you have a personal call, or someone calls a business line, and it'll ring also. It's very convenient, you know, for people who need that. So once again, when you're buying a phone, you look for a phone that supports 2 SIM cards, if that's important to you. Okay? And also the operating system we spoke about. What matters about it, you know, whether you choose Android or iOS, meaning Apple, is compatibility with other devices. Some people have everything Apple, and that's what they want, and that's great if that's what you want. So you get an iPhone. Some people, they have other devices like a tablet, or they're using maybe a Windows computer. Android seems to work better with Windows, you know, when you're doing certain things together. The iPhone doesn't work quite so well, but it still works. You also, you know, if you have a knowledgeable friend or relative, you might want to have somebody to help you, to ask questions, and, you know, it depends what your friends are using. You know, if you haven't gotten the phone yet, or you're getting your next phone, you know, I always find it's better to have somebody to help if you're not an expert yourself. And as far as the application software we were talking about before, browser, email, games, whatever, what matters is this, if you want a specific app, the majority of them are available in both Android and Apple. The same app. The developers write it, and you can get it for either. But sometimes an app is only available for Apple or only available for Android. So you should look at the apps that are important to you. I mean, there's a million email apps, there's a million browsers, and they work on both. So, you know, for the majority of the stuff, this isn't an issue. But it's just something that you might think about and check out, you know, if you're getting another new phone. And of course, you get your apps from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, depending if you have an iPhone or an Android phone. Okay, and you can install apps from other than these places, but generally it's not recommended because you're compromising the security of your phone if you do that. Generally, the apps that come from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store are checked for any kind of nefarious activity, although some of them have slipped through. But you can be pretty sure that the app isn't going to do anything nefarious to your phone if you're getting it from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Okay? And that's it. We're out of time. Any questions? I'll stay as long as anybody wants to